G'day, Corey, and thank you for joining us on ECI TV.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Can you tell us what your job role is at Profile?
Pretty much everything, but to be more specific, product development and like production manager. But everybody kind of has several different roles here. It's not like one person's designated to a certain job. We kind of all do many different jobs, which is good because it doesn't get boring, and we always have somebody to back us up if we're out, or if we want to take a vacation. There's no problem. Somebody else doing the job.
So we'll see you on a broom as much as anybody else.
It's not a big deal. We've always done it that way, so it's kind of it's second nature just to do that. You don't have to think twice about it. So,
is there anything about the job you don't like?
Actually, no. I'm very fortunate, and I think a lot of people think the same way who are here. We are very fortunate in the fact that we've got something that's consistent, and we've been here. A lot of people have been here over 20 years, and it's just been we've just been very successful as far as like being able to make our own products. We're not having to we don't have to really rely on any outside sources except for a couple things, but we try to keep that to a minimum. So over the years, if we had to make something or we were having problems getting something, we'd usually be able to buy a machine that we can make the products ourselves here. But it's just been, I enjoy coming here every day, and it's been 32 years now.
Was this your first job?
No, I worked in a restaurant, which is fun. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Waiting, but that's pretty much exactly how my restaurant experience was.
The big difference between that and what you're doing now, what made you decide to work for the family business?
Well, I've always been into bicycles since I was about 11. Well, before that, but I really got my first BMX bike when I was 11. And then my father, he took an interest into my riding right away and started making some frames. And then he cut out some pieces like aluminum for a stem or something like that. And then I would come work when I was in middle school, like 13, 14 years old. And I'd come, we started making frames, and I'd help cut the tubing. Or one of my jobs that I guess I was famous for is like the hutch frames that we made for a while. There's on the brake bridge, it was all drilled out in little tiny holes that said hutch, and I basically did every single one of those. So, so that was but that was like my first experience. But I always like building stuff, and like my big thing growing up was Legos. That's all I ever did is build Legos. And then I went to, after I graduated high school, I worked part-time Profile after school, and then I went away to Florida State, which is up in Tallahassee, and then I'd come back on the weekends and do stuff around when we needed extra help. But as soon as I graduated, I came to work here, and I had an engineering degree, and then I wound up getting really interested in the CNC machine part. And we did have a couple at the time, but they were lathes. And then I kind of like gravitated towards the mill, which I thought I could be more creative on. That's when I started doing some of the sprockets and aluminum cranks when we did them back in the day, and some handlebar stems, and just took to it. And I was able to kind of taught myself all the CAD CAM programs that we do use. And never really got into the fabrication part as far as like welding, or says we were getting out of the bike frame side of it and just going to components. But as far as like the cranks, Jim's more the fabrication guy. We do mill most of the cranks to get them ready for welding, and so did all the programs for that. And then we got into doing the elite cranks over 10 years ago, which that was kind of me and him dual project, where we would both he didn't put, this is how I want it to look, and this is how we got a form. So we made all the form dies and everything for that. We're able to machine all that stuff and get the crank to where we wanted to, where we really liked how it looked. And so that was kind of my really only time I delved into fabrication, but most of my stuff is machining.
So let's talk about the elite cranks a little bit more. How did the design of the crank, because it's so much different to your race crank. How did that design come about?
Jim had an idea. He wanted to make a fatter crank that was a little bit, it would stand out a little bit more than, because it was at the time, pretty much all 41 or any chromoly crank arms, they kind of all look the same, 48 spine They're all the same shape, pretty much, almost an oval or a rounded square, I guess you could say. But then we came up with this. He kind of sketched it out, and then I kind of thought, the process of doing it, there's two processes to forming the material, so you got to take each one into consideration. First one is you have to swedge the material, which you get a round bar. In this case, I think it's about 1 3/8 in diameter, and then you swedge it down to taper it. And then normally we just, like on a regular crank, we would do the same thing but add a smaller tubing, and then we wound up using the bigger tubing that we kind of used for the SS cranks back in the day, and we're able to swedge it, and then we came up with a form die which would flatten it a little bit more and give it more of a actually rounded shape, as well, as far as just being just a straight taper. If you notice, the Elite cranks, they're actually got a curve that goes across the whole crank, as far as, and then tapers on the outer side, the outer diameter of the crank arm. So that kind of, we both worked on that for a while, and we drew it, and then it's not really as precise as, like, it's a CNC part. You have to go and it's kind of trial and error, where, well, we didn't get it to bend enough, so we got to change the dies, and then we went back and forth probably like a half dozen times till it came out to where it was going to be good, and we can make them pretty consistent, and wound up doing, there's a couple other pieces. There's a gusset, and there's 2 end pieces that go welded on it. But as far as, like, getting it, the shape, it's all really, we got, like, I always make, and Jim's always like this too, if we're going to make one, we're going to make 3 or 4 of them. As far as, like, so if I made one die, I made 3 or 4 of them. So we always have them, so everything will always be the same.
Yeah. So what is the idea behind the gusset, and why is that not on other cranks?
Well, the gusset, the way the Elite crank worked out is that it was shaped, and if you didn't have the gusset in there, there wasn't enough of the rounded tube to attach to the crank boss itself. Oh, right. So the gusset actually adds a little bit more strength and actually fills in the spot where there wasn't enough height on the crank arm to go around the boss. So the gusset helps doing it that way.
And were there a few iterations before you got that?
Oh yeah, absolutely, huh? Yeah, so now what we do, all the gussets, actually we do it on the EDM machine. We stack about 20, like 040 or 032 sheets, and then we cut them on the EDM machine. We used to get them laser cut, but it would take too long to get them done, so we just do, like we do the pawls for the cassettes. The same, I think it's a 4x12 brick, and we just cut the gussets out, and we cut the end piece for the pedal and for the crank, the axle boss.
So something makes me think that it's not standard 4130 chromoly. You've used a slightly different material.
That's all 4130.
Oh, it is?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
And then there's a lot more work into it, because we have to, once it gets all there's a lot more welding into it, and then we get they have to be heat treated, and then they get back, and we have to broach them, and then they go get painted or chrome plating, which chrome plating, as beautiful as the cranks come out where we get them done, it takes 4 or 5 months to get them done anymore, and it's not unheard of, because that's how long it takes to get something done right, because that company that we use is probably the best in the US, and it's probably one of the biggest as well, but you just gotta you gotta follow their timetables.
So is chrome a big seller here at present?
Yeah, chrome is one of those things that got to be, even like if you look at other companies like S&M and who make a lot of chrome frames and bars, and it was hard for them to get them done during the pandemic, and then it's getting a little bit better now, but it's still the same. It's just it's chrome. I would never want to own a chrome crank. It's not the easiest thing, but to do it right, you really do have to follow a lot of EPA regulations.
Yeah, and they're changing all the time.
And they change all the time. So it's not, I guess, if you can make money at it, but it's just not the easiest work in the world, because you have to polish everything. I don't mind polishing, but I don't want to polish 100 or something. I'll polish 1 or 2. Post
COVID though, people are less picky about color, aren't they?
Yes, they are. But people have gotten almost starved for color, because what happened, we could make as much as we could as far as like bottom bracket cups or cone spacers or something like that. Hubs, we were always able to get kept the colors through, because the one anodizer that does all that is not very far from here, and they do a fantastic job, and it wasn't where we would get like the bulk anodizing done. They wouldn't, a lot of places, they didn't even have the colors. They just stopped doing other colors. They would do silver or they do black and maybe a gold once in a while. But when the process of now working with the one anodizer that we have, they're going to be able to, we're going to get all the colors back in stock probably at the beginning of the year for like all the bottom brackets and, well, more of the chain rings as well.
Well, while we're talking about finishing, what about the limited edition stems with the logo wrapping and all that sort of stuff? Is that all done locally too?
No, the wrapping is done, I can't remember. It's actually done, there's a couple of places that do it, but the wrapping, it kind of got to, it's really, when we did it, it was okay, but it got to be where they started to get inconsistent. And what we're doing now, we're coming out, we call it a galaxy rust, and it's actually anodizing where and I do not know how they do it. I kind of do, but it's really complicated, and it's almost like an art form, the way they put the different colors on there, because if you have to compare anodizing to something, it'd be like dyeing an Easter egg, where it's kind of exactly how it's done, except it's done in a little bit more caustic solutions and it uses electricity. But same thing, how would you get all those different colors on there? But it's a lot to do with masking, and then they use bleach and all kinds of stuff. But the Galaxy Rust, we're actually in the process of getting another batch of that done. It'll probably be early spring when we have that ready.
So I've got a 50th anniversary stem on my bike. Will you be doing other limited designs similar to that?
Yeah, probably do another different color,
right.
like another splash color during and we might do a different, there's other colors we can do. We've kind of stuck to the basic 10 colors that we have, but we could probably do a different, I like some of the neon greens, or there's actually another one that's like a gunmetal color. I think that'd be pretty cool also.
Do you get to choose the colors?
Yeah, there's actually, I'll show it to you before, this is on like a keychain.
Oh, yeah.
And there's probably 25 different colors. And then problem is keeping consistent, is that in the anodizer, because just like anything else, dyeing Easter eggs, if you leave it in longer, it'll get darker. If you leave it in 2 minutes, it'll be lighter. So you kind of do the same way. The people that do your anodizing, after they do it for a while, they know exactly how long it's got to stay in there. Black is easy, silver is easy, but when you get to like the greens, and especially like the reds and the blues and the purples, it takes a lot of, they have to be really precise on how much time they leave them in for everything to match.
Yeah, you want your front and rear to look the same, don't you?
Yeah.
One of the other products you've had a lot to do with is the AC2 hub.
Yeah.
Why did you come up with another hub? You already got the Mini, you've got the Nomad, you've got the Elite, and there must be a few others in amongst them.
Yeah, the AC2, I always had the idea. It's funny because I thought of it about the same time we came out with the Elite hub, was quite a while ago, and I just kind of put it on the back burner, where you would take the bearings and press them into a tapered cup, and then they would go into the bottom bracket shell, the hub shell, and then it would be easier to either take them out or even install them, where nobody would need a special tool really, or they wouldn't have to worry about pressing them out and then destroying them even when they put them back in. So the AC2 makes it where anybody, and it's actually, we do make a tool for it, but if you have a little wooden dowel, you can pop them right out. And the other thing is the adjustment. Instead of having nuts that lock down on it, it uses a wave spring, which actually once it's pressed to a certain distance, it's got a certain amount of load. And the bearings we use are Angular contact bearings, and they're rated for a certain amount of load on them for them to perform right. And it's funny because they're probably the strongest bearings you can possibly use, and not too many people use them in the bicycle industry because it's hard to figure out where the application would work. You can actually probably do it in a bottom bracket, and I think there is a bottom bracket that does use them, but you have to just hit the preload right, and we're able to do that on ours because of the shims that we supply with it. You can actually dial it into where it's just perfect. And that's the other thing. It's just, instead of using screws to tighten it up, you just use the preload spacers.
So what's the idea with the load? How much load should you have on it? Should it not move at all like a normal wheel, or should there be actually...
You can actually, the other thing is that you can actually take it and you can have a little bit of side play on it. And what we wound up doing, on the axle diameter, we have what we call a burnishing tool that goes over the axle when we're machining it. It's the last process, and it smooths it out to within a couple tenths of a thousandths of the nominal, the perfect diameter for the bearing itself. So that way you won't have, even if you had side to side, you won't feel your wheel move. But ideally you do. You want to actually put the right amount of spacers in where you can't have any movement in the hub itself on the axle, sliding back and forth.
So at what point of the development did you come up with that idea of pushing the driver back in without needing fishing line or whatever other method to get the pulls back in?
I started thinking, and I go, well, let's try it. I go, because there's actually a tool that we kind of came up with to do it like the Elite hubs, but yeah, the fishing line, and it's one of those things that I started thinking about it one day, and I saw it on something else. I can't remember what it was. I think it was fishing reel. That's exactly what it was. I took a fishing reel apart, and fishing reels have pawls and springs and stuff in them too. That's what makes the clicking sound when you're reeling, and keeps the reel from going backwards. So I was I take apart fishing reels a lot, and I saw one in there, and it was milled in the aluminum, and I go, man, that's probably work on our hub. So that's where I got that one from.
I can't think of much else to cover on the AC2 hub. What product are you most proud of working on since you've been here at Profile?
Probably the cassette stuff. I can remember back in like the early 90s, I started thinking, well, we started making freewheel hubs again. We made a mini magnetanium. Oh, what was it? We called it the mini mag because they're magnesium, but they're the mini hubs that we made back in the gyro light hubs. We made back in the 80s, and then we stopped making hubs for quite a while. And then like 92 or 93, we started making freewheel hubs again. And then I would pull apart like road bike hubs or mountain bike hubs and with the cassette magnetism. And at first it looks overwhelming, all the parts in there. But then once you start thinking, well, if you can get this, then I think, well, how do you get these springs and where do you get these pawls? Well, you just have to come up with this design on, this is going to be a flat spring, and called up a spring company and said, this is what I want to use it for, and they told me, kind of gave me the parameters on how I should make the spring and what type of material and how hard it would be as far as like spring tension. And then I went to get the pawls, which is kind of hard at first because we didn't have an EDM machine, but we did have somebody that cut stuff for us, and they had an EDM machine. So I drew up the pawls and cut them out. And then you got to figure the ratchet ring, how many teeth you want in the ratchet ring, and how you're going to do that. Well, we wound up broaching it, or we actually EDM some of them for the AC2 hub and the Z Coaster hubs. But once you get all that down, it's actually pretty easy. I mean, I say that now since so many of them, but it's one of those things that you just got to take one piece at a time. You can't like get all just stuck on one thing. You sort of do one, and then we'll move on to the driver, and then we'll figure it all out. But it worked out really good, and it's kind of it's not the most complicated mechanism in the world, and it just seems to work really well.
It's very reliable, and I'm sure you don't get too many problems with it. So I'm blanking out. Is it the process itself or seeing the finishing product that you enjoy most?
Oh, seeing the finishing project. And when you asked me what was I most proud, the Z Coaster is really cool. I mean, the way it works and everything like that, it's got more applications than just a bicycle hub. The way the pawls are actually pushed down and held into like a free coaster position where there's actually the springs are pushed down and the pawls are pushed down until you engage it again. That was pretty cool because that's one of the things it took me like a weekend. I started thinking, I go, how we're going to, and I always thought about how can we do something like that, and then I started thinking more, and then one weekend it just came to me, and I sat and pretty much drew everything out, and then like a week later we had all the parts made and put it together, and it worked. So that was kind of cool.
You mentioned earlier that Jim does a lot of the welding on the cranks. What happens when he decides to, go off fishing instead of turning up to the factory? Who's going to take over?
No, he does a lot of the tacking.
Oh, the tacking.
Yeah, and then we do have other people that weld for us, so he's not the only one that welds cranks here. Because there's another thing I can't do besides polish it. I don't think I can be a welder. But we have other people. We have people that have been working for us for a long time welding cranks. So we'll be able to do that still.
Yeah, I remember there was a family that were doing
Yeah, there's a family. It's actually they're all Vietnamese, and they've been welding cranks for us for a long time. And then some of them have retired, and then other members of their family, whether it be their nephews or cousins or something, they've taken over and they keep doing it.
Wow, just like a little branch of
yeah.
Just going back to the very start, how did you find yourself involved in BMX in the first place?
Well, we lived in New Jersey till 1979, and up there they had built a BMX track probably around 77. And I remember in middle school, all the kids were getting like mongooses and they called them clovers, but they were tough wheels. So I go, man, that's cool. And then my friend had a Raleigh Rampart, and then I thought that was cool, so I ride that all the time. So I had I don't think it was a Huff, it was like a Sears brand thing, and I kind of tried to make it look like a BMX bike. It was like I'm 10 or 11. And then we wound up coming down to Florida. We were already planning on moving here, and my father started building our other building down the street where he was going to do this race car stuff. And we got down here, and then there was a BMX race that we went to that was not too far from here, and right around the corner there was a shop that had BMX bikes in it. So we went in there and I was looking, and there's a Torker in there. And I'm like, oh man, I really like that. And at the time it was $275. I remember that distinctly. And then, man, that's a lot of money for a bicycle. But my dad could appreciate the work that he appreciated what work went into it as far as like the frame itself and all the aluminum parts on it. So I wound up buying that and took it back to New Jersey for a while. And didn't really race up there. I just rode it around. And then we came back here to Florida in like August of 1979. And then I raced in like the next month. And then we raced like 2 or 3 times a week for like years. And that was good. I mean, if you're really into anything and if your heart's set on it, you're going to get good at it. And I got okay at it. And then I turned like 14, and then I started, it's like the 10,000 hour rule, I guess, almost for me, but it just popped, and I became a really good rider, and I started winning a lot, and I'd go to nationals, I could make the mains and stuff like that. We had the team already, so I felt like I wasn't just thrown on the team because my father owned the company. I could race still too.
You said you raced till you're about 18.
Yeah, 18 I think was my last series race I raced was 18. It was the NBL Grands in Louisville, and I actually made both mains there, and that was it.
Because you made both mains, you said
I was going off to college, so that was it. But it was fun though.
And you've been to Australia racing as well?
Yeah,
So what was that, 89?
That was 89, yeah.
So what was that experience like for you?
It was fun because I'd never been over there, and luckily there was people, the Mays, Colin, Darren May and Chuck May, were able to show me around and not be able to. I wouldn't just stuck in the country with. Although everybody in Australia, they were very friendly. I always tell people that I go, if I'm going to go anywhere, I'm going to go to Australia because they like us.
But you haven't been back?
No, I haven't. My wife and I, we talk about it quite a bit, so we'll probably go back there someday.
Oh, nice.
But it was fun because I was able to see a lot of things like you see on, just like somebody coming over to America, you see stuff on TV, and then you go out and see it. I had to go see the kangaroos, and then I saw actually a koala in the wild. And
it wouldn't take long to see all that just at Gary's house.
No.
So obviously your mind's ticking all the time. You're looking at new ideas and new products. Do you have anything you can talk to us about?
There's some aluminum cranks they're working on. It's going to be more of it's not anything to do with freestyle or dirt jump. It's just going to be a race thing and mountain bike thing and like an e-bike type of crank. It's going to have a couple different mounting options. There'll be like an ISIS mounting option for the e-bikes, and then it'll have for the axle, and then it'll have like a spine 24 millimeter axle for the BMX or the mountain bike applications.
Will there be weight limits on those or anything?
No, nope, it should be all good. I've got the design. It's gonna, if I had to picture it, if I had to describe it, it's a oversized elite crank made out of aluminum. But it's solid. It's CNC mission. It's not fabricated.
Does that mean it's going to have less steps to prepare them and get them out?
Yeah, it'll be a lot. It's just quite a bit less work, and then but it's from what I've drawn so far. It's going to take a bit of time to machine it, but in the end, it'll be worth it. It'll come out really nice.
So what length do you expect those to be released?
Probably we do short ones, probably like 160s all the way like to 175s.
Okay. So you wouldn't see bigger ones like 180s?
No, probably not.
Okay. Anything else? I know you've had the push stem out for about 15 years and acoustic for a similar amount of time?
Yeah, I've got another stem that I've been messing around with, but we'll wait till it's actually more of a race style stem, and it's kind of almost integrated to look like it's part of the headset.
Oh, wow.
Where a lot of road bike stuff, if you notice, if you actually into that stuff, you can see that they've got some pretty clever ways to integrate the headset and the stem together.
I do watch a bit of GCN, and some of the stuff they're doing on road bikes is crazy, but a lot of it won't apply to BMX. So.
No, there's some crazy. I mean, like one company, they do a printed metal. It's a printed titanium metal stem,
right.
and they don't. I'm afraid to find out how much it costs because I know how long. First, I know how much long because of what they do with printed metal, especially. You could do pretty much any metal, but it's the powder that they use it's called cinnerizing. What it does is it's actually places it down, and they can do all kind of crazy, anything that you can draw, you could probably do with a printed metal part. But then they actually have to like heat treat it, where it's almost like if you had to describe it, it's like you're firing like a piece of pottery in the kiln, where it actually makes the material adhere to itself, and where it actually becomes one piece instead of like a million little tiny pieces. You change the molecular structure in it.
But something like that would be pretty time consuming.
Yeah.
So
3D printing is as cool as it is. It's hard to justify production. It just takes a long time. But for like medical stuff and all kind of like aerospace stuff, it's awesome. It's really interesting. Like I said, if you can... No, I do have...
Not for prototyping or anything?
No. I have a 3D plastic printer, but you can make a...
I guess you got all the tools
here. You
here.
make a little army, man.
You got all the tools here, so you don't really need to do prototyping.
No, but they're cool to have. I mean, I always think about what could we use that for, but there's not really anything as far as production-wise that would help us or benefit us in any way.
So you guys have dabbled quite a lot with pedals, with the gas pedals over the years.
Yeah.
Any ideas if you...
Pedals are tricky because it's gotten to the point where you can go buy a $20 pedal. It's not that bad. Like the plastic ones. So, sure, and of course there's going to be people that want to buy expensive pedals, but there seems to be enough companies out there making them where it's hard to justify it. Making a pedal where you can sell enough of them.
Can you ever see Profile making frames or forks or bars again?
Probably not. Yeah. Probably not fabricating and stuff. It's just too time consuming. Yeah. And as far as like what we're geared for now, I mean, we've got everything dialed in really good for what we make right now. As far as like any type of component fabrication stuff, that's the only thing we're going to stay. We're going to definitely stay with the cranks, but as far as any type of other one, we're really not set up for it.
Yeah. What about components like brakes that you've never really touched on before?
No, there's a lot of things like that. I mean, it's kind of like I've thought about it, and you look at it like it's a cassette hub. There's a whole bunch of parts, but once you break it down, it's not that bad. But it's one of those things. It's a lot of people using disc brakes. And And like there's companies that make them now, like Paul's Components, and they make all that stuff, and it's really nice. And I don't know, let them have that.
Is there anything that you see on the market right now that you think Profile should be making something a bit like that?
Besides, I think the aluminum cranks.
Okay.
There's a lot of potential there because there's a couple of companies. A lot of companies that make them, but there's a couple that I've seen in the mountain bike end of things that do a really good job, and they're nice. And it's kind of The problem was with us, like maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, the interface on how you would change the spider or like a one-piece sprocket for a single-speed drive. There was like 10 different types. Now there's kind of going just to one. So once you can make it to where it's like everybody's doing the same thing, it's a lot easier because that way you can make sprockets or you can make spiders and then it'll fit on other people's cranks and stuff like that. Where the interface is the same on all the cranks.
Would you expect to use a 48 spline spindle on those cranks?
Yeah,
So all of your hardware that you've got right now will just slide straight in?
It'll be bigger axle. It'll be a 24 millimeter
okay.
instead of the biggest one we have now is 22. Yeah. So everything will be different. I think it's going to be a little bit of different adjustment. But because they do have, because the bottom brackets they have now, most of the mountain bike ones are floating where you have to physically adjust it. You're not like cranking down the cranks and tightening it up against a tube spacer metal. So it'll be a little different, but I think people like it because it's gonna, the way it looks, it's gonna be like an elite crank.
Yeah. Does that mean there'll be another universal, what do you call them? The interface for your sprockets for the spline drive made in 24 mil?
Yeah, it'll probably be like there's. If you look at it, I don't know. I've never counted like a Shimano or like a box. I don't know how many spines they have on there, but it'll be the same diameter where you can use different bottom brackets on it. But you can just it'll just be our own spine to fit our crank because it's hard to match other places, other people's spines because there's so much variation in them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So thanks very much for joining.
Oh no, that was great. I mean, it's fun. I mean, I've got a lot, and I take a lot of times I take stuff for granted. Where I've been doing this so long, where it's almost second nature or something's really easy. But I always like learning new stuff. So I always like this crank's kind of got me excited because it's a challenge. It's gonna, and especially how to manufacture it and then manufacture it in a way where it's not going to cost $500 per crank.
Yeah.
But I think it'll be good.
Even just where the pedal screws in is going to get you thinking, do I need an insert for that? Or,
exactly, yeah.
It must be pretty cool just saying, okay, it's more about the problem solving of all the different...
No, you're exactly right. Yeah, it takes a lot of time because my nephew works here now and he's kind of like, he's just started going to college, he's an engineer, he's really bright, but I tell him sometimes, I go, you got to design it around how to make it. You have to be able to make it. So yeah, that's what I think a lot of like the successful companies, like they have people they'll be, as they design it, they will be figuring out how to make it at the same time. Because you can design anything, whether you can make it profitably is a whole other story.
So the workflow itself, like being out in the factory floor, you can see that stuff has to jump from one machine to the other.
Yeah, but we've actually made we spent a lot of changes in the past couple of years as far as making stuff like the hubs come out complete, the stems come out complete, a lot of the stem caps come out complete, sprockets come out complete. There's pretty much only, because we used to have like 3 or 4 operations, they'd go from one machine to another, but now we've got them all. Pretty much every time the machine runs, complete parts come out. There might be 3 operations that are going on the machine, but a complete part comes out each time. Yeah. That way it helps the operator too, where instead of the thing running for 5 minutes, the machine's running for 20 minutes, and they can go do other stuff.
You make a lot of your own tools and jigs and things to make your life easier. It must be really cool having everything that you need to make those as well as the products.
Yeah, that's the other thing. You got to think about how you're going to hold stuff, especially like in the mills. Lathes are a little bit easier because there's just a drawbar and there's a spindle that clamps down on it. But the mills are a little bit more, takes a little more thought to go into how you're going to fixture everything and how you're going to hold it. But there's some things called dovetails where you actually mill a dovetail on the part, on the raw material. You cut it to whatever length, say it's 4 inches. You mill a dovetail, then you could hold it in the 4th axis or hold it, and it's always going to be positioned exactly right. So you can go from one fixture to the other without having to worry about the tolerances. You don't have to worry about it's going against stuff. No, it's going right in the dovetail. It's in perfect position each time. So that way you're able to keep the consistency almost dead on each time.
Yeah. Actually, talking about tolerances, that reminds me I meant to ask you a question about recycling. So you have a lot of excess materials.
Yes, we do.
And are there times where tolerances might be out, so you just have to toss a hub shell, for example?
Oh yeah, it actually happened. Dave's pretty good at. Dave makes most of the hubs, but what we've done we've done things so many times, and like the programs have been so dialed in, where you might run, especially on the stems. No, it's just they run. Even if a tool breaks, it won't. It'll just break. We could run the parts still, where it's not like it's coming out of a lathe where if a tool breaks, you're going to be running junk parts. That's the other reason. When we do the drivers, we turn the driver. Let's say it's a 9-tooth Tromo driver. We'll turn that in the lathe, but we won't put. Even though we could cut all the pawl pockets in there at the same time, we don't do that because if a tool breaks, you're going to have drivers that are junk. You can't go back and rework them if they're in the. So what we do, we turn the drivers, then we put them in the mill. There's either 6 or 8 drivers in there at a time, and we mill each one. And then the tool breaks, everything in the right position. You could just go back and redo it.
Oh right. Going back to recycling, are you encouraged to do that, and is it a government enforced thing to do recycling, or is that just something you guys decide
just something
to
to
do?
go? It makes sense for us too, because we recycle pretty much all the metal that whether it's aluminum's probably 90% of it, and then we have steel. We have at least 6 dumpsters or hoppers that recycling company brings to us, and each one's designated. Usually 3 or 4 designated just for aluminum. There's one for steel, and then there's one for aluminum. We're really good about keeping stuff separated because we actually get more money when the stuff's really clean and it's not contaminated with other materials in it. So, but aluminum is probably the 90% of the materials recycled. But like I said, we don't throw any steel we don't throw any of that away. It all goes to the recycling company, which is actually, we're fortunate because we'll fill up all the hoppers and then they'll come and get it next day.
What about the liquids in the machines?
We actually, most of the time that ends up, it evaporates. The water part of it evaporates, and then what happens, the coolant stays in there. The coolant will stay on the chips, but most of the time we're able to drain it out in the machine before we actually, especially in the mills, it'll drain out before that actually goes somewhere else. But we do have, once in a while you have to change all the coolant out, but we have 2 500-gallon tanks that we take the old coolant, we dump it into, and then collection waste recycling company comes and actually they recycle all that, the old coolant. Yeah.
Is it biodegradable?
It is. I don't know, but they use it. There's oil in it too, so somehow they go and separate it and they dispose of it properly.
Wow. See, that's crazy. I think that's pretty much all we do have for you for real this time.
Okay.
So thanks very much for taking
no
the time. And hopefully one day we'll catch up with you again in Australia.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely going back.
Take it easy.
All right, thank you. Oh, that was good.